Hey, friends. Welcome to this week's photography recap. I'm Jason Odell, and my Substack is The Photographer's Perspective. Thanks for joining in today. I really appreciate it. It might help if I could see the screen. Hey, there we are. That's great. Um, Good to see a nice, healthy chat. Lots of friends out there. And we were talking about earlier as whether or not something is going on with the Substack um, algorithms. The chats seem to have gotten larger. But hey, if you're here, I'm happy. It's Friday the 13th. Oh boy, what could possibly go wrong? It's great to be here. Um, and I'm mixing my fandoms today because I've got my Starfleet poster, but I've got my awesome Star Wars T-shirt or shirt. So uh, I don't know. May the Force be with you and also with you, and live long and prosper. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, it's great to see everybody. What is new today? So every Friday I send out a newsletter called Friday Postcard. I've been doing it. It was my project. I've done it for an entire year, starting last January. I appreciate all of my subscribers. Really helps me out. And so I just thought I would start using the live stream platform to sort of recap things, what's going on. So I want to go into a little photo news from this week, and then I want to talk about the photo that I shared um, for this week's Friday postcard, which was a picture from a workshop I did in Long Island, New York last summer. So I'm going to save that for last. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's been going on. So a little bit of interesting photo news this week. Again, not a lot of new things are always coming out, but there was an interesting camera announcement this week. So let's jump over to my screen and make sure that we're good here. Yeah, so this is the OM System OM3, which came out last year. And this is a modified version of this camera. And this one is modified for astrophotography. Let me see if I can make this bigger. There we go. It's modified for astrophotography. What does that mean? Um, well, it means that they've modified the sensor filter pack. And what am I talking about? Well, you got a digital sensor in your camera, okay? And by itself, it is sensitive to an incredible range of light from, in some cases, ultraviolet, visible, even into the near infrared. Not thermal, we'll talk about thermal later. But this is a problem because if you try to take regular photos with your camera, all of those other wavelengths, the spectrum that we can't see, your camera can see, and it shows up as contamination in your images. So every digital camera has, at the very least, some form of IR infrared, what they call it, IR cut filter. Okay. So it's a low pass filter, meaning wavelengths below the infrared part of the spectrum, which is what we can see, pass through, but the infrared wavelengths that are above that cutoff frequency, about 720 nanometers or so, get blocked. What does that mean for you? It means your pictures look good. Okay, if you didn't have that filter on your camera, you would get all kinds of weird, bright halos and just artifacts that just would be strange. And it was a problem in early digital cameras until the manufacturers figured out that this was a potential issue. There was a notable example of this in the Nikon D2H. The Nikon D2H which was I think it was like a 4 or 6 megapixel, I think it was like 6 megapixel action camera. It had problems with infrared contamination when it first came out. So photographers would put a filter on their lens to block the infrared. Well, this camera, the OM System OM3 Astro, with a nice little price tag of whatever it is, $2,500, not cheap. This is a dedicated camera for astrophotography. So they've modified the filter to allow a certain wavelength of light to pass through and hit that sensor. And that wavelength is called hydrogen or H alpha. I'm not an astro guy, but that's the magic wavelength to get the red colors that come through from nebulae and all these cool, galaxies and whatever. So this is not the first time I've seen a camera modified like this, because Nikon had come out with a variant of I think it was the D810, or I don't think it was the D850. I think it was the D810, where they had modified it for astro sky photography. Now, the problem with this is that, once again, you've got a camera that's not going to work well for regular daylight kind of shooting. So this is a specialized camera for people who literally want to do a lot of night sky shooting. Now, it's interesting that they've come out with this, because, frankly, you know, you never know where camera manufacturers are going with things. So in this particular instance, OM Systems taken their existing camera, the OM3, which I actually have one. It's not in front of me. Oh, where is my OM3? I've got it up here. Okay, so nice little camera. Um, so this is the regular one, but a nice compact camera. It's a great retro kind of styling, but they've modified that filter pack over the sensor. So the idea is the you can take cool pictures like these. Now there are some interesting features in OM system cameras, and I'm not here to sell you on one, but there are some interesting features that make them um, kind of nice for night sky photography, assuming you've got the right kind of setup. And one of these, and I didn't know about this until I read the article, is that um, a lot of cameras nowadays have this high resolution mode, especially cameras that don't have a lot of native resolution. So this is a 20 megapixel camera, and it's got a mode where you go in and it does some tricks, and it will capture a high resolution image, usually about 50 megapixels or so, or even 80 megapixels depending. And the way it does it, okay, is that it takes multiple photos and it moves the image sensor a little bit between each photo. So it's like doing a long exposure, only it's going to take all, 5, 6, 10, whatever, how many pictures it takes, I can't remember. It's going to blend them together. And you can do this either in what they call a handheld mode or a tripod mode. Now, the difference is um, that if you try to do it handheld with the tripod mode, the images won't align right. Okay, so it's taking a bunch of photos that are all shifted a little bit, and some Nikon cameras have this feature too. It's not unique to OM system. And then it merges the composite. Now, the benefit you get of that is that if there's slight movement, like the stars, because there's the apparent movement of the stars in the sky, um, you can it will compensate for that. Now, it works really well if you also combine it with what's called an equatorial mount. This is one of those motorized tripod mounts that you would normally put a telescope on. So you can do this, and what it's going to do, it's going to blend these images together, and that gives you an image with more dynamic range, with less noise. So it's really ideal for astrophotography. Okay, and then there's some other cool features in the OM system cameras, and again, this is just because I own them. It's got a mode that I've tried, and it works amazingly well, called Starry Sky Autofocus, and it's one of those things you just have to trust and believe because it works. So in this particular autofocus mode, because when it's dark outside, it is hard to it's hard to photograph, and it's hard to focus. Okay, so you put it in this mode, and it's best on a tripod, and you press the autofocus button, the AF button, and the camera starts, moving the lens and doing all this stuff. But you can hear it whirring and all kinds of things. And it takes probably about 10 to 20 seconds. But I'll be darned if it doesn't focus on the pinpoints of the stars. It finds them and focuses on them. I tried this in Iceland when we were shooting the Aurora Borealis, and it was like, 12:30, 1 in the morning, and you get a wake up call. You're not functioning, and you can't see anything because it's dark. Your night vision stinks, and push the Starry Sky AF, and boom, the camera focused on the aurora. So that was very cool. So lots of little things in this camera. Again, it's not for everybody. Obviously, first of all, you'd probably want to be an OM system user. because otherwise you're going to have to buy lenses. And then it's not going to be a day-to-day camera because without another specialized filter, you're going to let that, the hydrogen alpha signature would contaminate your photos. But it's cool, and I'm glad that it's something new that came out. So that's one thing that came out this week. So you can check that out. And another one is Nikon came out with a new lens recently, and I wanted to talk about this one because this is a DX lens. Let me explain what this is. This is a 16 to 50 millimeter f2.8. You can read this VR lens Nikon Z. What does that mean? Decoder ring, please. The focal length is 16 to 50 millimeters. The aperture is f2.8. You'll notice that it is only f2.8, so it is not a variable aperture lens. It's a constant aperture lens. And VR means that it has vibration reduction or optical image stabilization. Now, this is important because there is another designation here. That is this thing called DX. And DX is Nikon's, oops, sorry about that one. Got big there for a second. DX is Nikon's designation for APS-C format cameras. What does that mean? It's slightly smaller than 35 millimeter format. APS-C is a 16, what is it? 16 by 24 millimeter sensor. Full frame is 24 by 36 millimeter sensor, right? So that means it's people call this a crop sensor. I don't like the term, but that's what they call it. So this lens really behaves like a 24 to 75 millimeter lens if you were to frame it like a full frame camera. So there are two cameras, or really three, but one's been discontinued, in Nikon's mirrorless Z mount lineup. That's the Z50 Mark II, and there was an original Z50, and there is something called the Nikon ZFC, which is like a little retro camera. Now, I liked those cameras. I had a ZFC, and it was cool to have a small camera like that. The Nikon Z50 Mark II is quite powerful, actually, but it lacks what do you call it? IBIS, in-body image stabilization. I can untongue tie myself. So that means if you put on a lens that doesn't have a vibration reduction system, an image stabilizer built into the lens, you don't get an image stabilized system. And that has drawbacks because it means you have to use faster shutter speeds, et cetera, meaning higher ISOs, more noise potentially, right? My frustration with the DX line that Nikon had was that you can use any lens because they all share the same mount, whether it's a full frame lens or a DX lens. But the DX lenses were all mostly slower aperture zooms. And many of the really good full frame lenses are not image stabilized. That's because Nikon puts IBIS into their full frame lineup, the Z5, 6, Z7, Z8, Z9. So that put Nikon Z50 owners at a significant disadvantage. Well, this lens fixes a lot of that. It's finally an opportunity to get a nice mid-range zoom that has a fast f2.8 aperture, and it's image stabilized on top of that. So if you're like going small and you have a APS-C Nikon kit with this lens, talk about a nice little walk around street lens. 24 to 75. That's a very common focal length range for travel, street, whatever you might want to do, urban photography. Really nice. So I'm stoked. Not that I'm going to go out and buy this because I don't have my Nikon system anymore, but I'm really glad to see that Nikon is starting to produce lenses for their DX line of cameras, their APS-C cameras, because frankly, up until recently, they've kind of felt to me like a redheaded stepchild, so to speak, right? They're good cameras, but they're missing just a few features, and it just seems like, well, that's what you buy if you don't want an expensive camera, or, but there are plenty of people who really do want a smaller camera, and they want to have the lenses to go with it that work with it natively. So this is a great step. I kudos to Nikon for coming out with this one, and it is not inexpensive. I want to say it's yeah, it's almost $900 US. So it's a little bit pricey, but if that's what you're shooting and you want a good professional level lens, it's a nice option to have. Okay, what else do we have today? Oh, so there was this really cool article that I came across. There's a link to it in my Friday postcard that went out today. So if you go to the photographer's perspective and look at my current article, if you haven't subscribed to me, hit the subscribe button somewhere up top there where it has my name. I would appreciate that. And you'll get these weekly postcards with a recap of stuff. There was a really cool article in one of the camera websites talking about Getty Images. You've heard of Getty Images, they're the huge stock agency. They've got photographers at the current Winter Olympics, and they're using, check this out, thermal cameras to capture photos of the Olympians and the crowd. Now, this is very cool. So now, I mentioned infrared. Okay, now I have an infrared camera. Infrared is not, that little slash sign, it is not the same as thermal. Thermal is a form of infrared radiation. But when I take infrared pictures, it's the near infrared spectrum. It's just almost visible. What they're talking about is actually capturing heat signatures, like the FLIR systems that they have in the military for seeing people in the dark because they can pick up their body heat. Check out these photos. Look at that. Here's the speed skater. They're going, and you can see the warmer areas are the orange and the yellows, and the colder areas like the ice is blue. How cool is this? That's really, really interesting. So there's a speed skater. Here's some of the ice dancers, and you can see all the warm people in the crowd up there. That's so cool. I just think this is amazing. Um, Really interesting stuff. And then finally, they had a photo from yeah, here we go. The I don't know if it's a snowboarder or jumping, but pretty awesome if you ask me. So you can it's just I thought this was so cool because this is a unique take on digital photography. It's a unique take on the Olympics, and I think it is absolutely cool. So thanks for all the hearts, people. I'm looking at the chat. Looks really, really. We got 78 people here. Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Um, all right. So, what about this week's photos that I shared? So, if you're subscribed to the Photographer's Perspective, I will have articles. Um, I'm starting to do more webinars and online classes. Subscriber perk. My online classes will be free to all my subscribers. If you want to if you want to get in on the Zoom live on the Zoom chat and get a better screen, you can upgrade to one of the higher account levels. So I had an article that I published this week, and it was on um, upscaling. So upscaling means you're enlarging your image. And I talked about how it's always been a little bit iffy to upscale images because you can only enlarge things so much before you start to have the image breakdown. So the classic way to get a more detailed image was to get a higher resolution camera, and you can certainly do that. But what if you don't have a higher resolution camera? What if you have a highly cropped image, or you're just dealing with small images maybe from a phone or older photos that are lower quality, lower resolution? What do? You can upres them. And I'm using a program that I paid for called Topaz Photo to do this. I used to just kind of use Photoshop. You can get away with a little upscaling just the normal way as long as you're not going too big. So I want to share my Lightroom catalog with you. Now, this was the photo that I worked on for that article. This is a pair of black skimmers in Long Island, New York, and I shot this with my OM1 Mark II and the equivalent of a 1,000 millimeter lens. And you can see that the birds are still pretty small in the frame, and there's a lot of empty space here. And so you could imagine that you'd want to zoom in on this and possibly crop the image. Okay, but when you crop the image, you're throwing away pixels. You're getting rid of a lot of, resolution. So just because the image looks fine small doesn't mean it's going to look good blown up. So if you go back to my article where I talked about upresing or upscaling, I walked through the general steps of how I took this into Photoshop and used a tool called Topaz Photo, and I used its AI-based upscale um, algorithms. And what that does, okay, and you know me, I'm not like here to talk about the glorious of AI. I don't generate stuff into my photos from AI, at least not anything for meaningful content. But what it's going to do is it's going to up enlarge the image, and then it's going to use AI to try to fill in the details based on your original photo. Okay, that's very cool. So my end result was this, zoomed in, and so I took that image that was cropped, and when it was cropped it was about 8 megapixels, give or take. And when I finished with it, we can zoom in here, I actually got a little bit of reasonable detail on this. And now it's a 26 megapixel image. Is it perfect? No, but I could print this at a normal size. I could print this probably 20, 25 inches, 26 inches across without any trouble at all if I wanted to do that. So maybe add to my collection in my office here with some more photos. So that was the article that I published this week. And again, thanks again for all the people who subscribe to that to get little tidbits like this, because there's a lot of stuff that happens out there in the photography world with gear, but also with software. And part of my job as a full-time photographer is to figure some of these things out so that you guys don't have to, that I can just share with you how to use some of these tools. And that brings me to the final image, and this is the photo of the week from the Friday postcard. I'll just zoom in on him real nice. He or she. This is the black skimmer, same bird as I had in the previous photo, and it is flying towards me along the dunes. There's some vegetation there, and you can see it's captured a fish. It has caught a fish in its beak. So if you watch these birds, what they do is they fly along at real right above the surface of the water, and they have this razor pointed bill, and they just open it up like this, and they skim the bottom half of their bill, and they snag a fish with that razor sharp bill, and they bring it back to their nests. Now, where was this? Let's figure this out. Let's go find this on the map. Where did I take this photo? Assuming my internet works. There we go. Come on. There we are. That's not it. Let's find the. There we go. Here we are. So where are we? This is Long Island, New York. This is Nickerson Beach. It's public. You can go there. Um, and this whole area, let me switch over from the road map to the satellite view, because I was not standing in the water when I took this picture. You can see all these dunes. Now this is all protected because this is where the skimmers, the oyster catchers, and the terns nest. In fact, there are some potentially threatened or endangered terns. We didn't see those. So it's in Long Island, in New York. So not very far from the JFK airport actually. And I had a group there last year. Um, and we had a really good time going out to the beach in the mornings. There, zoom out. Yeah, there we go. See, right there. So you wouldn't think you do a lot of wildlife photography in New York, but Long Island um, got some great spots, and they breed in the summertime. So May, June, July, August, depending on when you go, you might see chicks, you might see them sitting on nests, you might get attacked by the birds because they get a little bit testy when you come into their area, but that's how it goes. Okay, so um, I think then it's been a pretty decent week here. I don't know. Hopefully, you guys have had a good week. Um, and if there's any, um, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. I'm just trying to take a quick look here and see if there's anybody in the chat who wants to chime in. But it's really great to be here. This is the recap. I am still working on some more course content. I'm trying to break things into manageable size pieces for everyone. So I've got things in the works coming up, but it is really great to have this community here on Substack, and it's a fantastic place, and you know be safe. Get out your camera. I saw a post the other day where I think it was an article. It was someone went on a walk, and they had a timer set, and what they did was every 5 minutes their timer would go off, and they would then look for any kind of picture. It didn't matter what it was, wherever they were. They took a photo every 5 minutes and come back, and you've got this sort of log of photos from your walk, and maybe you'll see things differently. Photography is all about learning how to see, right? Seeing our world, presenting that. So I appreciate it. I just I just think it's great that everybody's tuned in. So if you like this, do me a favor, hit the heart button, um, hit the subscribe button. I'm gonna have to check out your page, Illy B. I'm gonna check it out um, because I really, if there's one thing I like, and Substack is kind of, this hybrid newsletter, but social media, and you know how social media gets. So if there's one thing I really enjoy, it's seeing real photographs in my feed, no matter how you made them, phone, film, DSLR, whatever. It's nice to see people's view of the world. In fact, I always like to think when I go out and take people on a workshop, a safari, and I do have a couple of photo safaris coming up. I forgot to mention, I've still got space. We're going down to Florida in April for the breeding season of the birds down there. Really easy place to shoot. It's all boardwalks in these estuaries over the water. Yeah, there's alligators in the water there. And in mid-April, I've gone different times of year. In mid-April, the chicks should be hatched and in the nest, so you can get pictures of the parents feeding. And what's glorious about these locations on my Florida workshop, which is, again, it's in April, um, you don't really need a massive telephoto lens. In some cases, you're kind of shaking hands with the birds, especially the wood storks that are there. So it is a really fun thing. And what it's about, I'm gonna do a webinar. I'm gonna share photos from there because it is one of the most accessible. You would never know that this place existed if you were there because you're driving through residential retirement communities. Yes, it is South Florida. Okay, I realize this. So right nestled in between the golf courses, there are some man-made wetlands near the water treatment area. I know it's crazy, right? Um, but you walk in there right at sunrise, and there are the herons and the egrets and the wood storks, and sometimes we see spoonbills, uh, various flavors of herons, green herons, tricolored herons, little blue herons, great egrets, snowy egrets, and they all nesting in these trees, and you can just be right there watching them. So on this workshop, what I'll do is I teach you not only just my settings for, how do I get a bird in focus, but you can also practice your flying bird shots because they're going to come in and you can get these cool shots where they come flying in. So I'm going to do a webinar on that pretty soon. So if you're interested in joining that, it's a small group workshop. It's a small class for I think it's like over the course of 4 or 5 days in Florida. Uh, Message me. I can send you the link to where you can sign up. I do have spaces open for that. It is an absolutely fantastic place if you're into bird photography. It's a banger of a place. So with that, um, thanks again for tuning in today. Um, this has been a quick Friday recap of what's new in photography. I'm Jason Odell from the photographer's perspective. Thanks again, and I'll see you all real soon here on Substack. Bye bye.